Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it shared here on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your cryptid and UFO experiences, so reach out to me and let's get yours on the next episode of Uncomfortable. If you haven't yet, make sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. And once you get a chance to listen to an episode or two, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you can. That alone is the one most important thing that you can do to help get this show out in front of more people. And with more people listening, that means more great experiences coming your way. If video is more your thing, then make sure to subscribe to Uncomfortable Podcast on YouTube, where you can get the video version of most shows. Please make sure to click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you are notified with each new release. Take a minute and check out the Uncomfortable link tree, as it's the single best place that you can find anything and everything uncomfortable all in one spot. The link for that is down below in the show notes. I got a great show for you tonight. The gentleman's name is Maxim Furek. He is a paranormal author, and the praise that comes with this gentleman, reading his bio is kind of crazy because it makes me a little envious. He's been around the music industry for a long time and paranormal. But Doug Hychek of Monster Quest fame, very high praise from that gentleman, as he's basically referred to by Hychek as a 21st century incarnation of John Keel. So, if you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to Mr. Maxim Furek. Maxim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eric. You know, those accolades are making me feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, that's what we do here.
But thanks nonetheless.
Well, no, I mean, Hychek, speaks for himself. So, I mean, he's great at what he does, and for him to say something with that kind of weight behind it about your work, I think that says a lot.
Yeah. And just to explain that a little bit, John Keel is I'm his biggest fan, but John Keel was sort of like the Indiana Jones. He lived the life, he walked the talk. And sure. I haven't had those adventures, but I think that maybe what Doug was referring to is that I'm sort of a bit eclectic, just as John Keel was. John Keel was all over the place. He was diverse with his interest and his book writings. And, and then the same thing with me. I mean, I just dabble in UFOs, in Bigfoot, in cryptids, and demonology, in spirituality. I mean, I love it all. And I'm like everybody else. I'm just trying to figure it out. What is it? What's
Exactly.
on the other side?
And I mean, we're two peas in a pod when it comes to that, because I've said this a million times, and I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing it, but I was obsessed with UFOs by the age of 5. Van Doniken, there's a lot of things to be said about him and what his proof is and what it all meant, but it was pivotal in my upbringing and my belief system throughout the rest of my life. So,
yeah. And we talk about Van Doniken just like we talk about talk about Adamski, but Van Doniken, whether or not his research is accurate and on the money, despite the fact that he plagiarized a lot of the stuff that he got it from other sources. Nevertheless, he hit it out of the park. He pressed some of our buttons. I mean, we love this stuff. And Chariots of the Gods, Ancient Aliens, all of that. I mean, like, he went and started a tsunami, and so many other people have written books refuting him, but he's still the man. And again, he tapped into something that we all have a fascination for. So that was his gift. I mean, call him what
Absolutely.
you will. The other thing too is that just fascinates me is that we tend to gravitate more towards pseudoscience than science. The pseudoscience is more exciting. It helps us fill in the blanks, the gaps. We become part of this thing. We become part of this adventure, as opposed to the scientific realm where everything's black and white, pretty much cut and dry, what we do know. But but Eric von Daniken, I read all of his books too, and I shared the same fascination, and I still do. And I just think that he really pulled something off. And again, he
and it's been going for how many years?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not fading away.
Yeah.
You watch Ancient Aliens, and they're going to say the things they say, right? I mean, everything's a conspiracy, and everything, it's all aliens, and it's a show. I get that, but when you boil it down, the stuff that Van Daniken talks about throughout almost 40 years.
Probably right. Yeah. Probably years.
I mean, the stuff that he talked about so long ago is still in our face. It's not going anywhere. And I don't know. I mean, you bring up the term pseudoscience, and to some people, I think that sounds like a dirty word, like somebody's poking fun at, but I mean, truly it is a pseudoscience. I mean, we don't have an understanding of it. Before we got on the air, I was telling you about some experiences that I had in my personal life. There's no explanation for that. Mm-hmm. I'm a logical person. I'm not prone to hysteria. I'm not prone to making up stories. I had what happened to me. And even though I don't have an explanation for it, well, I think maybe I have a better understanding and an ability to kind of explain now after 40 some years. But it's just, like you talk with Jeff Meldrum, right? He deals in science. He deals in foot morphology. And, he will sit there and unequivocally say, something is leaving these tracks in the woods and people are finding them. Yes, there's people are out there hoaxing. Yes, there are things that are out there that are being misinterpreted. Yes, there are bear prints that are double stepping in the same thing, and it looks like a Bigfoot print, but it's not. But the bottom line is there is something that's leaving tracks out where somebody should not be walking barefooted.
Right. Yeah.
In February. Mm-hmm. Those kind of people, the Cliff Barrickmans and the Jeff Meldrums, they have a little bit easier time because they have that crutch that they can lean on of science. And I respect that, and I don't take anything away from that. Mm-hmm. But when you start getting into topics like, the things that I've had happen in, with my dad passing and the paranormal type stuff, those things aren't easy to lean on, and they're not easy to explain, and there's no experts in it. So what do you do with it? You have an experience. If you can look at it logically and you can get rid of all the other extraneous stuff and you're still left with having that experience, I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff Meldrum just happens to be, a doctor, a professor. He happens to be an academic. And so that immediately, garners him a lot of respect and accolades just because of what he has going for him. But what about the average person that's out in the woods looking for Sasquatch, that sees things and hear things and does the footprints? I mean, they're just as reputable. They don't have the degrees after the names, but I will say this, I'm a big fan of J. Allen Hynek, and Hynek contributed to Project Grunge, Sign, Blue Book, all of those. He was the go-to guy for the government.
Yeah.
A skeptic that came around. But what Hynek did for us was he gave us definitions. He gave us language. And one of the things that he talked about was high strangeness. And
Yes.
Eric, just like what you're talking about, the with the Sasquatchers that are out there, although they never came up with a carcass or with legitimate DNA, but still we have levels of high strangeness. We have elements of high strangeness, including witnesses and multiple witnesses, the smell of Bigfoot, usually like a wet dog or like
Mhm.
fecal matter or rotten eggs, or
Yep.
sometimes perfume. We have the sounds, the grunts, the howls. We have maybe the wood knocks. You hit a tree, and at the dead of night, if you hear another person or another thing answering with that, you know it's not a squirrel. You know it's not a bear. So, I mean, that's just, there's that conjecture that maybe it just is a Bigfoot. The tracks and everything. So, in itself, those are just like elements of high strangeness, but put together, there's something that I think is reputable, something that gets my attention, something that maybe the scientific community doesn't, accept as definitive proof, but still, there's something there that the Bigfoot community, has found. They've amassed all this information. And
Mhm.
you were talking a little bit, we were talking about pseudoscience, but even the whole realm of cryptozoology is viewed as a subset of zoology and also as a pseudoscience, only because the
Yes.
scientists don't recognize it as a legitimate, study. But that's okay. There's millions of people that are seeing things,
Mhm.
seeing the same things, and when you look at that and you look at the behavior of Bigfoot, the shape, all of that, there's something there, something that is gripping and something that is genuine. We're just looking for the ultimate proof. We're looking for that body or the DNA. And so far, we haven't had any. We've had close calls, but a lot of the DNA, is from either black bear or brown bear or Himalaya bears or, or the sun bear or
Or,
whatever. But we
or if it does come back with anything human, it's considered contaminated,
yeah, okay,
and then
that too.
and then it gets thrown out.
Yeah. Well, and on the same realm, I'm a snowbird. I spend time in Florida and I spend time in Pennsylvania, but back home, we have Chestnut Ridge where they have all of these
Mm.
UFO and Bigfoot sightings,
Yeah.
and that's just an amazing thing. I mean, there's the, I don't know. I mean, it's every where I look, there's people there, these true believers that believe that there's something going on, and they just want to be heard. It's just, and again, getting back to Alan Hynek, he was a skeptic. Everything he saw, he just said that it wasn't. When the witness would step forward and say that they saw flying saucers or orbs, Hynek would be ready, along with every other government official, saying that it was a reflection from Venus or
Swamp
marsh
gas.
gas, or the people
Yeah,
were hallucinating or needy or whatever. Hynek came around full circle.
you
And
did.
this took place after the swamp gas incident in Michigan, where these girls at a sorority in Michigan saw the crab. They saw these flying saucers, and Hynek went out there to investigate and said that it was swamp gas, and the entire political community, including Gerald Ford. I think Gerald Ford might have been governor, but he called him out and said, "No, what happened here was legitimate." So Hynek started to be a little bit more attentive to what he said, and started to become more respectful. And he said this: he said that the scientific community, including myself, has been very disrespectful to these witnesses. And rather than listening to their story and saying, what did you see? When did you see? How did you feel about it? All of it, doing the scientific method, he would
Right.
just discount it. So Hynek had that epiphany. He had that experience where he became a true believer and started to add much to the realm, as a scientist, to the realm of ufology, including the terms high strangeness and also close encounters of the first, second, and third kind. So he's
Right.
given us a blueprint and a template, And all praise to J. Allen Hynek. He's one of the greats.
And he had a magnificent goatee.
Yeah. He went in front of the United Nations to talk about UFOs.
He did.
He was kind of cool. So
yeah. He's as a child, we were talking earlier, at around 8, maybe 9 years old, my godfather bought me for a Christmas present, bought me a hardcovered blue book of Project Blue Book. And at that age, I didn't know what the hell I was reading. It was way over my head. But it was something that I kept with me, and still have it on a shelf in here somewhere. That that was a significant point in our history as far as being these types of people who are entertaining these things.
Yeah, I look for commonality between Bigfoot and flying saucers. And by the way, I use the term flying saucers and UFOs rather than UAPs. It just sounds more earthy to me,
I don't like the new terminology. No, I don't either.
Yeah, and no offense to the Pentagon, but
Maxim, let me ask you on that point. So, as someone who has spent a good deal of time researching and experiencing high strangeness. So I'm going to throw this out to you, and you do with it what you want. But when you go to a paranormal hotspot, say a haunted location, one thing that you'll hear often is a knocking on the wall or on a door or on a wood cabinet. You'll have, and now I know the difference between taking a photograph in a dusty room and getting orbs versus seeing a true light emanating orb. I had one appear in front of me and my daughter at a location back when she was about 15 years old. So I know what that looks like, difference. So when we start talking about Bigfoot, and so often you'll hear odd mechanical noises in the woods around these things, things that don't sound like they belong.
Yeah.
Everybody reports hearing wood knocks. And how many times do you hear somebody who has had a peripheral experience of either being around or witnessing a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, whatever you want to call them, where there is a orb of light that either precedes or is in the vicinity? So what if this is all tied together? And what do I mean by that is, what if the wood knock, because to my knowledge, nobody's ever videotaped a Sasquatch walking up to a tree with a big stick and slamming it against a tree. What if that sound is a peripheral effect of these things, whether it be flying saucers or Bigfoot or other cryptids? What if it's a peripheral effect of them coming into our ability to perceive them? What if that's an effect, not necessarily an action, that somebody is, a Bigfoot is smacking wood against wood to get that noise? What if the lights that so many people report in conjunction with craft sightings, the small lights that seem to jet around and be a separate entity from the craft, what if those things are all related?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's juicy stuff. I definitely want to go and respond to that. What if Bigfoot and flying saucers travel through an interdimensional pathway? And Jacques Vallée was the one who said a while back that the extraterrestrial hypotheses doesn't work anymore. It doesn't make sense to envision the Space Brothers going trillions of light years from their planet to ours. Takes too much time, too much energy, too much everything. Nobody has that technological, sophisticated know-how. Nobody. So when Einstein and Rosen talked about the bridge theory, and they said if you could fold the space-time continuum and just go have a bridge, or what was later called a wormhole, that sort of makes sense. Jacques Vallée talked about that. A lot of people have, but I believe that Bigfoot and flying saucers travel through an interdimensional pathway. But following up what you said, Eric, and that's pretty interesting. Let's just say that when Bigfoot comes from dimension A to our dimension, that you hear a knock. It's almost like a sound, like an introductory sound that they're coming there. What if the smell, that horrible smell, comes from the other dimension and we're smelling that? So that's one thing I think that we need to go and just take a look at. And again, nobody knows, but all we're doing is we're putting up a hypothesis. Take a look at it, see if it makes sense, and then go from there. Just like Jacques Vallée said that extraterrestrial hypothesis doesn't work anymore. It's just too primitive, too arcane, doesn't make sense. We've moved on from that. But I think we need to go and take a look at other possibilities and wait for the scientific community to go and give us something of substance that would go and, validate this. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that when they traverse that dimension, that parallel universe, I think that they bring with them sights and sounds and smells, and that may be some of the things that we're seeing. I believe that both Bigfoot and UFOs have some sort of a supernatural, paranormal essence, whatever that is. And people that I talk to that communicate with Bigfoot, they say that Bigfoot can communicate telepathically. That Bigfoot doesn't walk, but it glides. That it doesn't reflect light, but it emits light. That you see them in front of you, then behind you, that it has what's called rapid transport. That Bigfoot could go and go from the tangible to the intangible. So there's a whole lot of speculation.
Well, if there's any truth to Native American lore, as far as these are concerned, they've always been referenced as being able to 1 foot in our world, 1 foot in their world.
Yeah, so spiritual. Yeah. And that's interesting too, because we didn't hear about Bigfoot until 1958. They had the big article in the Humboldt Times, Northern California. So all these people started to write into the Humboldt. Thousands of people. This was big news. 1958. They started to write letters saying that, yes, I believe in the Californian abominable snowman. Yes, I have seen this creature, Bigfoot. They put it on the wire service. It went around the world. It became huge. It hasn't stopped since then, 1958. So that was the shot that was heard around the world. But
so much so now it is synonymous with pop culture.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's that whole tapestry, the fabric. So pop culture is part of it. But we found out in 58 that this wasn't anything new. This might have been new for the white man, but the coastal peoples in British Columbia knew about Sasquatch for thousands of years. And how do we know that? Well, with the totem poles and the stories and the songs. They believed that to see Sasquatch was a sacred event. They believed that Sasquatch was the protector of the environment. There was a lot of really good things, that they would say about Sasquatch, the protector. One thing, though, I'll say, I remember when I was researching my book, The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot,
which, by the way, is the reason we're here to talk about. And we will get to it, I promise. But
or not, whatever. This is good. Or we could do it another time. But anyway, in The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot, there are a couple of things of interest, but there was a guy named Albert Ostman. This was 1924, and
Yeah.
Ostman he was a Swedish Canadian hunter trapper, and something was messing around with his campsite. So he decided they were stealing food and leaving tracks and all kinds of things. He decided to hide inside his sleeping bag with a rifle. He was going to jump out and shoot the bad guy. And what happened was something picked him up and he fell asleep. They carried him for miles and he woke up, and here he was with a family of Sasquatch, like a mother, father, son, and daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just watching him. They were very inquisitive. The daughter fed him sweetgrass. But at some point, Albert Ostman felt that they were going to use him to have sex. They were going to use him to procreate. So he freaked out and he had to make a plan. So he had chewing tobacco. He enticed the older Sasquatch to try the chewing tobacco. The Sasquatch got sick, got nauseous. Ostman took off and didn't say anything. He wasn't looking for publicity. And then there were articles in British Columbia about this Sasquatch creature. Ostman went to see John Green, who was a British Columbia journalist, and he was also one of the original Four Horsemen of Sasquatchery. Sure. Yeah. And he took Ostman's account. Now, this was before computers, before microfiche, before we could go and Google Bigfoot and have a description and all this. So Albert Ostman, his recollections were based on what he saw in 1924. And John Green believed he was telling the truth. The things that are unique about this was that it was the only known abduction by a Sasquatch that I've ever heard of. It was a description of what the Sasquatch family would look like and how they acted. He said that there was no smell. And if that smell is maybe zigzagging in between the dimensions, or if it's used for a weapon, maybe to chase people away, or maybe the perfumey smell to entice them, whatever, there was no smell at all with Albert Ostman. So again, they weren't trying to scare him or anything else. But John Green believed that he was telling the truth. And, to this day, Albert Ostman's description holds up. Now, the other thing that's interesting with Albert Ostman, this was one and done. Flash forward to 1961 with Betty and Barney Hill. They're traveling through the White Hills of New Hampshire, and they had missing time. So they went to the psychiatrist from Boston, and he does the regressive hypnosis and finds out that Betty and Barney lost time and possibly had been abducted aboard this craft and probed and all the other stuff. That opened up the floodgates. With Albert Ostman and the Bigfoot abduction, there was only a one-time deal. But with Betty and Barney Hill, this opened up the floodgates, and it became another aspect of ufology, another chapter, with people like John Mack from Harvard and Whitney Strieber, and all these other people that came forward and said, yes, I too have been abducted and probed and taken aboard the saucer. So this thing became, they had piggybacked on Hynek's Close Encounters, and that became Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind, where they were actually abducted. So again, Hynek gave us the template, but Ostman and Betty and Barney Hill and all the rest are part of this, what I call the tapestry. And I think that the Bigfoot and UFOs are just so interconnected, and that's the exciting thing. I think that's really to me, it excites me.
It is. And you bring up John Mack, and I'll tell you, the amount of hours that I have spent going back and watching the interviews with the children from Rua, Zimbabwe. The aerial school. Just the number of children who saw what they saw, the consistency with which they relayed the experience, and excuse me, and now so many years later, with some of the adults who are now coming out and saying, we never should have question those kids, because what we remember is what the kids are saying.
Yeah.
You know, they've got the one kid that says that he manufactured the whole thing, and you know, it was all a ruse on his part. But I've listened to enough of him that I'm not buying what that kid is selling.
Yeah.
I call him a kid. He's a full grown adult now, but it's just what an incredible story, and the amount of evidence because of their testimonies, and it's staggering.
Yeah. I have this thing that I conjured up. I don't know exactly where I got it, but I call it the universal rule of 90. So instead of 100%, it's 90%. Like, for example, with something like, say, Roswell, 30% of the people believe it happened. They're the true believers. 30% don't believe, and then 30% are on the bias. They're either way. You know, they could be swayed. And I think that works with most things, you know, 30, 30, and 30. Like, for example, your podcast, I would say that, or my books, that maybe 30% of the universe loves us. They want to help us. They love our light. They like what we represent. 30% don't like us for whatever reason, jealousy, territory, whatever, you know, whatever that is. But 30% just don't like the way you look, the way you sound, the way you come across. Sure. You're too arrogant. You're too opinionated. You're too this, you're too that. And then another 30% are out there, you know, worrying about other things other than, you know, Eric and Maxim. So sure. I think that's the way of the world. I think that's how it is. But we represent that 30 or that 60% of the people that believe or are looking for the truth. And I think that's the exciting thing about the paranormal, you know, trying to define the parameters, where it begins, where it ends. And it's almost like talk therapy, you know, when Jung and Freud developed talk therapy. You know, if you have this, I'm looking for something. If you have this, let me use my box from Bermuda. If you have this little thing that represents some trauma from your childhood, you know, some horrible stuff that happened, and you didn't cause it, but it happened, and you're safe now. But Freud and Jung will talk about, if you talked about this, you give this thing a beginning and end. You give it parameters, and you could put it over there on the side where, even though it's part of your background, part of your resume, it doesn't have to control you. So you just put it over there. And I think that with the paranormal, all we're trying to do, or maybe the best we can do, is start to define those parameters, you know, the beginning and end, the depth, the height, you know, the time, all this stuff. So I think that's the exciting thing about being a, you know, I mean, I call myself a researcher only because I'm trying to come up with the definitions and vocabulary. I mean, you know, I have seen flying saucers. I have seen numerous flying saucers, but that's the extent of my experience. I think that some people, maybe such as yourself, are fortunate. You're probably gifted and blessed with some sort of an altered state of perception, where maybe your vibration is higher. Maybe your level of consciousness is higher. Maybe you're able to tap into these things that are there, that are always there, that can be seen, but only certain people can see them. So, you know, I wish I had that ability. You know, I think my life is too busy, too much white noise, all that.
Yeah. I like the way you phrase that, because I think at times it feels like my eyes are open wider. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this could be because of the way I was raised. You know, my parents, when I talk about UFOs, they were not, let's talk about UFOs. They weren't that, but they never poo-pooed
okay.
any of it as well.
Yeah, they allowed you to consider it. Okay.
Yeah. They never shut me down. Yeah. And I mean, you know, looking back on it, I mean, that's something I definitely appreciate about how they raised me. Mm-hmm. You know, I've been the same way with my children, my son and my daughter. You know, they're in their late 20s now, and they're both the same. You know, my daughter's got a a little alien tattoo on the knuckle of her one, just because she's like, every time you turned on the TV, it had to be something about Bigfoot or something about UFOs, you know? So, I mean,
Well, she did it on her knuckle. That's a commitment.
yes,
That's a commitment.
yes, yes, it is. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, when we start talking about this topic, and it always seems to have to go this way, but there's a very divisive community when it comes to whether to consider the woo aspects, the supernatural or the paranormal aspects of either of these, probably more leaning towards Bigfoot. What has your experience been as far as your research into the writing of your book? Is that something that's really pretty prevalent, or is that a little more scarce than one would think?
No, it's prevalent, and I'm glad you brought that up. That woo factor, I'm in contact with a number of MUFON organizations on the East Coast, and by the book, they don't like to talk about that woo factor.
Right.
That's something they stray away from. However, I think the majority of them believe that it's there, that there's something interdimensional, something supernatural, paranormal, whatever, connected to saucers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of it. But with my own personal experience, I know that there's a lot of these, and especially in Western Pennsylvania, there's just a plethora of Bigfoot experts and researchers, and Bigfoot campouts and expos. I mean, we are cannibalizing ourselves. There's one every other weekend. I mean, we're ready. We're almost at the point of just tapping out. I mean, there's just the point of diminishing returns. There's comes a point where it's nobody's going to show up. So, but anyway, that's what they're doing. But some of these guys are flesh and blood guys, and they don't like people like me. They think that I'm sort of like me. I don't know. I don't know if they think I'm just some sort of a condescending academic, but I've been called Dr. Woo. I've been called a wooer. But, there's nothing wrong with exploring that, because after all of these years of searching for the abominable snowman and Yeti and Almas and Sasquatch, where is it? Where's the proof? Well, we don't have any. And if you don't, and I claim, if there's no proof, if there's no flesh and blood, then what's another option? So it just makes more sense. It's just logical to look at something else like an interdimensional theory for maybe being the method that Bigfoot and UFOs, travel. So that's my theory. I share that with a lot of other people. And I know a lot of these Sasquatchers, these flesh and blood guys, that are starting to come over to my side because they realize that they're not coming up with anything.
Well, that's the thing, because you start to talk to somebody and they'll give you the story that, they saw something peeking out from behind a tree, or they heard heavy footfalls, or they heard this, or they saw that. But then when nobody else is around, they'll be like, "Hey, have you ever seen the lights moving through the woods?" Yeah.
There's also a prejudice too. I think that, I'm proud of my background. I'm proud of my educational background. I worked hard for,
and well, you should be.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are out there bashing academics, for the wrong reasons, and probably because they're just jealous or whatever. I'm not sure what, but what I want to do is this. I want to go and elevate, the genre, the paranormal, to a place where maybe the scientific community and the public at large is more accepting and believes it more. So, I think if you articulate, if you speak the King's English, if you can describe some of these things, if you can show, some, well, we don't have any evidence, but if you could go and just look at some of the information that's out there and talk about it logically and make it understandable, then you're doing something that's good for the order. And I've been on a ton of podcasts, and I'll tell you, yours is a good one. I've been on some where some of these guys can't even put two sentences together. And these are our people. They're the ambassadors of the paranormal. Now, come on,
Yeah.
I mean, talk the talk. We're don't dumb it down. And but there's a war going on in Sasquatchery. A lot of the Bigfoot people don't like each other. They bash each other, and it's horrible. And
It's
you
a
don't
shame.
you don't
It really
see
is.
this until you start getting to know them and having the chat with them, and you see exactly what's going on. So whatever. I'm staying out of that fray. I mean, if you like me, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. But and if you want to call me Doctor Wu, that has
Well,
nice ring to it.
I mean, you make a great point. There is a divisive culture. You have really great people, and then you have the people who earnestly believe that their way is the right and only way. And that, they've got it nailed down. They know what it is, how it happens, where it is, what it does. And if you're going to call yourself an expert, I think there's levels of being able to say you're an expert at something. But this is so, it's been around for so long, yet it's still so new to us and our understanding of it. I like what you say as far as, my my thoughts have changed so much from being a young adolescent as far as UFOs and Bigfoot are concerned to what those thoughts are now. I've run the gambit. But I think, where my brain is now, I am in total agreement with you as far as these are interconnected, not necessarily that Bigfoot is the golden retriever for the alien grays. That's not what I'm saying, but there is an interconnected, whether it's the way they get here or how they traverse from their dimension to ours. It does make much more sense now that these cultures are not traveling trillions of miles at light speed to get here. They may just be right next door.
Yeah,
and we just can't perceive them.
Yeah.
And it just makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it's easier to believe. I don't know. I could be completely wrong, but like what you're doing with your research, and I've been critical of some specific people. And I really shouldn't be, because when I use the words weekend warrior, to me, that I'm not snubbing anybody. I think that what I do in this arena is important. I think what you'd bring to the table is important. I think the guy who can only afford to go out one day or one weekend a month with a camera strapped to his back and, do what he can do, I think that's important, as important as what Jeff Meldrum has brought to the table. And, I think as a community, we're all stronger when each one of us is doing our own little thing. But, in this day of AI, with the almost inability to tell the difference between real and fake, because it's only been around for a little while, and it's already gotten to the point where you can barely tell, if you're having the wool pulled over your eyes or if it's legit. It's making it so much more difficult.
And let me just jump in here. I have fellow authors, friends who are writers who are using AI to write their books. And I think that is a travesty. I think that's almost a sin. That's a horrible thing. And, that's just so wrong, but it's so easy for them to do it, so.
It's pretty disingenuous.
Yeah, it is, man. I want to say something else. This AI is a wonderful topic, but you mentioned levels
Hmm.
And I was just thinking, we have the Sasquatchers, the guys that go out into the, they camp out and they look for Bigfoot. They're
Sure.
the true believers. They're the flesh and blood. Then there's guys like me, the academics, that are looking for proof in other ways. There's another level too, and I think they're the what would you call them? They may be the experiencers, the
Yes.
witnesses, the ones who claim that they communicate with Bigfoot telepathically, that Bigfoot is the teacher and they're the students, that Bigfoot gives them gifts, that Bigfoot likes apples and corn, that Bigfoot likes certain kinds of music. And you get this whole narrative. And, I've done, I do a ton of podcasts, and I get some of this stuff from the guys, especially from Canada and British Columbia, that tell me this and that they're friends with Bigfoot. So, I mean, that's like a third level. I can't, say anything about that because I don't know. It's not my experience,
Right.
but they sound very credible, and they certainly come across as being very enthused and credible. But I just don't know. But that could be another. It's the realm in between. It's the people that actually make that connection. So
Yeah. That's interesting. That is,
well, I mean,
when it comes to the woo, that is probably, I may be wrong, but that specific part may be one of the most downlooked, people that's too crazy for people to wrap their head around, that some other creature could be communicating telepathically and giving
presents, gifts,
yeah,
tokens.
yeah. But I say this all the time. If you're gonna ignore any part of this, then you're not doing. It's a disservice, because if you're gonna throw this part out because that's crazy. Nobody's ever. That's not real. But there is a 7 to 9 foot tall, hairy bipedal, stronger than shit, something flexing out in the woods, making crazy noises and stuff like that. That I can believe, but they can't talk to you in your brain.
When I first heard about the connection between Bigfoot and flying saucers or orbs, I thought it was crazy. Didn't believe it. I mean, just couldn't wrap my arms around it. But in Western Pennsylvania, in Chestnut Ridge, that's where we have the majority of sightings. And this guy, Stan Gordon, I don't know if you're familiar with Stan.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Stan is the one who pretty much has been documenting all of this stuff. And Stan's narrative is pretty much dry and boring and academic. It's like watching wallpaper dry, but
Sure.
still he has tons and tons and tons of sightings. And typically, like Farmer and Mrs. Brown went out to the barn at 6 o'clock at night to feed the cow, and they saw a Bigfoot emerge from an orb. And Stan Gordon has tons and tons of reports like that. They're all the same. It started around 1973 when we started to see the connection between Bigfoot and flying saucers. And again, that lends me to believe that there's a paranormal aspect to both of these. Whether Bigfoot is emerging from a saucer, or whether the saucer lands and takes Bigfoot and takes him away. But Stan Gordon has been able to document so much of this, and we're really blessed in Pennsylvania, especially Western Pennsylvania, with all of these gatekeepers that are keeping tabs of this. Because let's face it, there's no single source, no single group that keeps tabs on all this stuff.
Right.
Pennsylvania and or Florida are number 3 as far as the Bigfoot sightings, after California and Washington. And I've seen Pennsylvania as number 3 with Bigfoot, and Florida as number 3 with the skunk ape. But again, there's no FBI, CIA group that keeps count on this. So
Sure.
it's guys like you and I that talk about this, and I'll tell you what, Bigfoot and skunk ape is big business down in Florida. I mean,
Yeah,
like
sure it
I
is.
have book signings, I have standing room only people coming, not because of Maxim Furek, but because of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That's the way that works. I wish it was that way, but there's just a real hunger and interest. And this is young people and older people. I mean, they just want to find out. They want to know what's going on. So, that's Bigfoot's tapped into our psyche just as flying saucers have.
And the best thing you can do is to have an open mind and stay intrigued about these things. I really believe that keeping a healthy, active interest in these topics is
Yeah.
it's what we need to do.
Yeah. I was talking to Ron Murphy a couple years ago. He's a Western Pennsylvania Bigfoot researcher. And I was asking Ron about 2023 Colorado train Bigfoot sighting. And there was a video.
Sure.
This newlywed couple were having their anniversary. They were on a train, and somebody shot what looked like a Bigfoot.
Mhm.
Some people thought it was somebody in a ghillie suit,
Right.
sneaking up on, so that they could sneak up on caribou and all the elk. But anyway, I was talking to Ron Murphy about it and whether he believed it was true or false. And he said, in the end, it doesn't really matter because it gives us an opportunity to take a look at that and look at the different facts. And that I thought was just a great way to phrase it. Because I called a number of people and asked them what they thought, and some people believed it was real, some people thought it was a hoax. Didn't matter. I mean, all we had was a tiny little video, so you couldn't really base any kind of conclusion on that. But I liked what Ron Murphy said. But
To that video, the one person that I did end up having a conversation with about that video did confide in me that, and whether this is true or not, I was never able to find the name of this place, if it existed or what, but there was some kind of an adventure camp that was very close to where that was filmed. And he suggested that that was a paid member who was in that area so that somebody on the train would see him. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but who knows?
Well, I'll tell you what, if that was me that took that video, the first thing I would do is I would take it to some university, some science department, to have them authenticate it and look at it and validate it and vet it and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would really be proud of that thing. So I don't know who shot it because they're not around. They didn't come forward. So
Right.
I'm thinking it might have been a little bit of hokey pokey there. So,
Could have been, but who knows?
um,
That's the other thing that makes this so entertaining.
Yeah.
On top of the investigative part of it
Yeah.
and
and
the research part.
and I did want to say this. We talk about Bigfoot as being exciting and dynamic and fascinating and all this stuff. There was when I was researching the lost tribes of Bigfoot, there was an article by this guy from the New York Times, and is Bigfoot real? And he talked about how boring Bigfoot is, because in all of these accounts, Bigfoot just sort of looks at us and then runs away. They're shy, they're reclusive, they don't attack and charge. The only account I ever heard of Bigfoot killing somebody was Teddy Roosevelt. He wrote a book, and there was an extensive
Right.
chapter about that. But other than that, Bigfoot seems to stay away from us. They shy away from us, and why not? I mean, if Bigfoot or the Greys are watching us, I mean, what a horrible example we are of living things. I mean, we're destroying the planet, we're destroying each other.
Oh, yeah.
India and Pakistan, who have nuclear weapons, are
good
going
Lord.
at it. I
Yeah.
mean, come on,
Yeah.
human beings,
We truly are the cancer on this planet.
yeah.
And it's sad to say, but Good Lord.
Yeah, but it starts. Whenever I get really discouraged about the state of the state of the union, and all the bad things happening, I just, like I'll say that, well, it's not me and it's not you. At least we're making a difference. We're trying to be,
Yes.
compassionate and altruistic and doing the right thing. And
Yeah.
and maybe also being the voice of moderation, not hysteria, but moderation, and just taking a look at the facts as we know them. So I don't know. But I mean, I think we're all fellow travelers who are on the journey. We don't know what the destination is going to be, but the thing that we share in common is that we have spirit guides and guardian angels and ancestors that go with us on this journey. And then with guys like me, I have a chance to meet exciting, interesting guys like you along the
Oh,
way.
thank you.
So, and the thing about that is that what you're doing for me is you're just saying, you're heading in the right direction. Atta boy, keep on going. So that's all we need. We just need that validation. One person saying, I think you're doing all right, so just keep it going. I mean, that's all you can ask for.
I agree. And, as far as this state of the union, the state of the world, it's headed for the shitter. It really is.
Yep.
Well, but there is a segment that I truly believe that there is an awakening that is happening. And whether you want to call that a spiritual awakening or, whatever context you want to put it into, there is a segment of the population in this world whose eyes are being opened to things that they might not have been open to a few years ago. I hope it continues, and I hope at some point we get onto the right track, because the nukes and the Pakistan and India and Russia and the Ukraine and all the other turmoil is just it's just senseless.
Well, I don't feel that we have a steady hand. I don't think we have a steady leadership, and that scares me. I mean, that's so as a former Vietnam veteran, and
thank you for your service.
Okay, you're welcome. But anyway, listen, when on that dire note, my next book is going to be The Paranormal Apocalypse. Is This How It Ends? And there's a gray,
interesting. I like that.
Grim Reaper, and there's an hourglass in the skulls, and author of the Shepton mythology.
Now tell me, within that picture, are there human skulls and alien skulls?
No, I think
together
they're just human skulls. I had an idea. I had a concept for this, and then I told Hanger One, Doug Hycheck's people, and they had their graphic designer put it together. So I'm working on the book. I'm hoping to have it done this summer. I mean, I will have it done this summer, but I talk about how fear controls, and we are afraid. We're like lemmings, and fear from religious groups, political groups, whatever. They like to keep us in fear because because then they can control us. So that's
the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. So Paranormal Apocalypse, Is This How It Ends? But I mean, what do you think of that cover?
I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. And it's going to be in just black and white and shades of gray. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're a little bit over. I know we talked about staying around an hour, and I had a little bit of a FUBA at the beginning, but let's close out. Tell us the Lost Tribes of Bigfoot by Maxim Furek. Where is it available? Give me a website, personal website, how people can find you.
Yeah. If they want to buy The Lost Tribes of Bigfoot or Coleridge Hoodoo or any of my other books, you could look at Maxim Furek, Furek, on Amazon.com, and there's read some of the reviews, and you could get it there, or you could, if you want an autographed copy, just hit me up on my website www.maximfurek.com, and just we could connect, and I could be glad to go and provide you with a signed copy, which would be
that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
I want a signed copy.
Yeah,
So.
that would be the best thing for me. But Eric, thanks so much for the nice conversation. I mean, it had flow. We went back and forth, and yeah, no, you kept me on track, and you didn't let me babble on, so that was good.
Well, I know this is it's a little shorter than what we normally do, but we always like to leave people wanting more. And I think with tonight's episode, I think we did that. Maxim, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you, a pleasure meeting you. Lively conversation. I loved it. And honestly, truly, I would love to do this again with you.
Okay, let's talk about that, and we could book something for the near future. That'd be great. So, yeah, thank you so much, Eric, and I hope your listeners enjoyed our chat.
I'm sure they will. Thank you. Good night. And as I say, always stay uncomfortable. Good night, my friends.